Thank you very much, Wim, and thank you for that introduction. So when Wim asked me last year whether I would present on communications this year at the induction, I said yes, but I also said provided that I can do it in person. And this is the 6th year that I'm presenting on communications. But with COVID last year and no travel, I was really concerned about having to do exactly what I'm doing today, doing it in a virtual format. And that is because body language, interpersonal skills are such an important part of communicating. And through the whole virtual process, we kind of lose that. And just before I go into my presentation, and as you guys start out in the workplace, I want to encourage you to not lose that. I know you are the generation of always on, and that communicating virtually is probably your preferred way of communicating. But if I can encourage you to do one thing, and that is to learn to pick up the phone, learn to speak to people, knock on that office door, go and speak to that person face to face. It's an invaluable skill, and it will also make a difference in the relationships that you build, even though you're starting off very much in a virtual world. So we are going to spend the next 45 minutes or so talking about how to communicate effectively in the workplace. And why Wim asked me to present on this as part of the induction is because it is different. It's different to communicating with friends. It's different when you communicate in a family setting. It's even different to when you communicate at university. The workplace is a whole new world. And although at university, you'll be used to communicating with different generations, it's usually your lecturer and the rest are your peers. In the workplace now, you'll be having to communicate effectively with people much older than you, some older than you, and you're going to face other barriers as well, which we're going to touch on. So these are really some tips today that, it's like almost like a survival guide to help you find your footing in the workplace, and communication is a really big part of how quickly you're going to fit in and how quickly you're going to make it work for yourself. Why is it important that we communicate effectively in the workplace? Your ability to differentiate yourself or your firm or win business, manage relationships, all of that will rest on your ability to communicate well. These are very wise words from Juliet Erickson, who is a communication coach. So she's an expert on this. How you communicate in the workplace determines your personal brand. And there's a lot attached to your personal brand, but people do form an opinion from the way you communicate. So if you're the kind of person who's going to WhatsApp your superior, your manager, late at night and use text speak, that person will very quickly attach a specific brand to you. And so you need to determine also in the workplace, what brand you want to portray? What is your brand? Define it and then communicate in line with that. How you communicate will also influence your relationships with your managers and your team. And ultimately, it will impact on your career prospects. These are the key actions required. So communication, and all of you are doing or have done or will be doing the communication subject. And you know that this is a difficult subject, and effective communication requires you to make an effort. It's not something that falls into your lap. It's not a talent that you're born with. It is something that you have to practice, work at, and make an effort. The biggest part or the biggest effort is probably understanding your audience. Who are you speaking to? So in the past, for this specific presentation, I would ask all the participants to do a little exercise of introducing themselves to me. This year, the format is different, and that is, again, the sadness of something that we've lost in this. But because of my previous exercises, I have a fairly good understanding of who's in the audience, but I can't see you and I can't engage with you face to face. But the one thing you don't know anything about me. I don't think that you would have gone and Googled me. If any of you have, I take my hat off to you. That is a good effort. But understanding your audience, understanding who you're communicating with will help you to frame and present your message clearly. And a little bit on, you'll see how quickly that can go pear-shaped if you don't do that and if you don't take into consideration how you deliver your message. Also, achieving the required outcome will take this effort. Just putting in some time of applying your mind to who you're communicating with and why. So, how do we define effective communication? It's one thing for me to tell you to make an effort to know your audience or the person you're communicating with, but ultimately, how can you determine whether you've been successful in that? And Milton Erickson has a really good definition for that. The effectiveness of communication is not defined by the communication, but by the response. And if you think about that, why do we communicate? We communicate to share information, but ultimately we share information so that there's an outcome to it. If you're not expecting a response from anybody, then why communicate? So here's a little formula for you. So measure of effective communication is the following. If the sender, in this case, it's me, I'm the communicator, if what I mean and what I say is what you hear as the receiver, then it was effective. And that's why it's so important to say what you mean, to mean what you say, and then also to think about how you're going to deliver this to make sure that your audience hears what you wanted them to hear. So here's a little case study of where exactly that didn't happen. Some of you may have seen this headline in the news: WhatsApp error leads to oxygen trouble for Eastern Cape Department of Health. It's a very recent example, as you can see, January, and this is what happened. So the sender was Afrox. Afrox meant to say that the oxygen supply for industrial customers will be under strain. They sent this out via WhatsApp, and they clearly included all their WhatsApp groups in it, because it also went out on the WhatsApp chat group created by Afrox and the Eastern Cape Department of Health to report shortages. But of course, the health department is not an industrial customer. So the message that was meant for industrial customers also went to the Department of Health in the Eastern Cape. And they took that message on board, and it resulted in the Superintendent General mistakenly understanding that they will not be getting oxygen either. This prompted her to start a whole new process to look for other sources, which of course was in breach of the Afrox contract. In the end, the poor woman had to answer to Parliament on all of this, and it just led to one huge nightmare. So yes, Afrox phrased the communication correctly, but they didn't think about who they were delivering it to. And of course, the Eastern Cape of Health didn't read the WhatsApp properly. They just assumed that what's on the group is relevant to them. And so you can see how quickly miscommunication in the corporate world can lead to costly misunderstandings and huge embarrassment. So this is just one example of a communication barrier, the virtual world, WhatsApp, emails, but there are also others. And I think it's important to be mindful of the barriers that you are going to be facing as you communicate in the workplace. Education and training are one. I can give you an example. You studied actuarial science, I studied journalism. You are very efficient in communicating through spreadsheets. I can only communicate via Word. I'm a Word person. As Wim said, I've got a long history with the Actuarial Society, but usually when I get a document from the Actuarial Society, it's a spreadsheet. And when they get a document from me, it's a Word document. And over the years, we had to find a way of communicating that I could make sense of the numbers and my words still gave meaning to the numbers. So as you can see, you can't just assume that somebody speaks your language. Especially if they come from a different field, and you need to be mindful of that. And while finding a common ground to communicate and is not always easy, you need to find that in order to communicate effectively. Status also impacts gender. The different genders communicate differently. You will all know that women communicate differently to men and misunderstandings happen. Then there are cultural differences. Your culture influences how you communicate, and your culture influences how you receive messages. Again, we can't change that, but we should be mindful of it. Prejudices. You may have encountered them already, and you are definitely going to encounter prejudices in the workplace. Again, be mindful of it. Physical barriers in the workplace also influence how we communicate. In a way, the virtual platforms have made a difference. So if you're in an office in Joburg and you've got a team in Cape Town, you can communicate more easily, but it's still a barrier. And then, of course, communicating via virtual platforms, as I alluded to earlier, it takes away so much, the face-to-face communication, the body language, being able to read all of that. So these are all barriers that you need to apply your minds to. And Understand that there will impact on communications, and that is the first step towards finding solutions. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, you guys are the always on generation, and you are all about networking and communicating in the virtual world. These are the most common tools that you will be using to do that in the corporate world. And I'm going to touch mainly on email, WhatsApp, and social media. There are also presentations and reports, but I'm not going to spend much time on them unless you've got any questions afterwards. But a lot of the rules that we talk about today and guidelines will apply here as well. Your number one communication tool in the workplace will be email. In 2020, some 306.4 billion emails were sent and received each day. So as you can see, email remains central to communicating in the workplace. And if you can get the email right, you've achieved a lot. There's so much room for error in emails, and if you get it wrong on the email, there's a record of it. So I'm going to give you some tips, very practical tips. And while writing email seems easy at face value, there are some pitfalls which I'm going to take you through. So the 6 key elements, so visualize emails, think of your emails in front of you, maybe open it up so that you can see as I talk you through it. The 6 key elements are the from field, where you display your name. And there I just want to ask you to make sure that your name displays properly. It's not such a big issue in the corporate, if you have a corporate email address, but if you use your personal email address to send out CVs, connect with people, maybe you're consulting, make sure that your name is actually displayed properly. I've received some weird and wonderful emails, and that's the first time somebody judges you. If you get a really strange email name with flowers in it and little hearts and different letters, it does influence how that person sees you before you've even started communicating. And then there's the CC and the BCC fields, so the carbon copy and the blind carbon copy fields. The 2 is obviously the person you're sending to. And then I want to ask you to really think before you copy someone. Is it only your manager who needs to get this email, or is it really necessary for the entire team to get the email? Also, as you email to and fro, do you need to include everybody? Because if you copy somebody, it's really, you want them to be aware of what the communication that's happening, but they're not directly involved. But really think, do you need 20 people on there? Is it really your manager and maybe the PA who needs to know about this meeting that you're setting up? So that's where you already need to start thinking about your audience. Avoid blind copying people unless you're sending out bulk emails. So in my case, I often issue media releases to around 100 journalists. And of course, you don't want to reveal all their email addresses in the CC field, so in the 2 fields, so there you blind copy them. The other thing about blind copying people, especially if it's a controversial or a touchy subject or something confidential, if the person that you've blind copied hits reply all, everybody will know that you blind copied somebody. So really avoid that. Then the subject line of your email is where you sell your email. That's basically where you go, read this email, it's relevant to you. I get about 150 emails a day, and the subject line really makes me decide whether I'm going to read it now or later, whether it's relevant now, whether it's not relevant. So it should be short and descriptive. And then the rest of the email is your greeting, then the body and the closing. We're going to go in more detail there. The greeting. The way you greet me in an email shows me whether you know who you're talking to, whether you've done your research. If I get a hi there, then I know somebody hasn't really applied their minds to who I am, why they're emailing me, or they didn't bother to look how my name is spelled. It's not an easy name to spell, but it tells me so much about who you are and how this communication is going to go. I'm going to judge it right there. Also avoid dear all or hi all or no greeting at all. Say you are emailing 2 people, say Vim and myself, you would say dear Lucienne and Vim or hi Lucienne and Vim. Those are all acceptable. And if it's more people, then say dear colleagues, acknowledge the team, like dear committee members, dear team members, or good morning, good day. Then the email body. If you are going to send me an email with a huge chunk of gray, and I've already got 150 emails, I'm probably not going to read it. It's going to be one of those. And I mean, from your own experience, if you get this huge email with all this text and it's just this huge gray field, you're just going to go, oh, I don't have time for this right now. So structure your email. Put the most important thing first. Use proper spelling, grammar, punctuation. Put paragraphs in. Use sentences, short sentences. And then also the tone of the message is so important. Consider how your recipient is going to receive this email. Write the email, read it again, think about it. And that's where I said earlier, communicating effectively and efficiently does take effort. Okay, these are some general tips and take note of them. They are going to save you going forward. Most of them I have learned from experience, and if I can save you the embarrassment, then yeah, I've achieved a lot today. So first write the email, then add the recipients. Before you know it, you've accidentally pressed the wrong button and the email goes off, half written or badly written, or you, as you thought that you should probably take that out. So write the email, check the email, make sure this is what you want to send, and then add the recipient. That way you know that it's going to be exactly what you wanted. Also, every email has a delay send functionality, so I would activate it. I definitely have. And there have been times where I've sent it and thought, oh, no, quickly, I actually wanted to change something. But it only works if you do it within that little time frame that your system gives you. Always expect your email to be forwarded. So the way you write your email, write it in such a way that if it gets sent to somebody on the outside, if it gets sent to your boss, to your friend, that you're not going to be embarrassed and that there's nothing in there that could be awkward or confidential. Like it's happened to me where I've emailed somebody very senior in the industry, emailed the PA, and it was a very relaxed email. It's like, oh, I hope so-and-so isn't too grumpy today. Please, could you ask him, when would be convenient to meet? And she goes and forwards it to this person and says, Lucienne wants to meet with you. What is convenient? But of course, this person is now going to read that I think that he's grumpy. It has happened to me, and it does happen. People don't think, they just simply forward. Avoid sending emails at the end of the workday, at night, or over weekends. Just about a week ago, and as I'm telling you this, I remember that I did get that email and I still haven't responded because I got it late on a Friday evening. Yes, it was a work email. It was Friday evening, and by the time I saw it come through over the weekend, I wasn't going to work, so I ignored it. And then come Monday, other things overtook it. So as I'm just saying to you, I just remembered that a week ago I got an email and I haven't responded to it. Don't let that be your email. You shouldn't be emailing work stuff on a Friday evening or over weekends, unless, of course, it's an emergency. Something that works really well is, because now you're going to say to me, yeah, but what if I work at night? That's fine. I do as well. It's my best writing time, for example. But what I do then is I finish what I want to send, I write it, and then I save it. And then the next day at 7 o'clock in the morning, I read it again, I put in the recipient and I send it. And what you achieve that way is, one, you check it when you're fresh, plus it gets into the recipient's inbox first thing in the morning when they're fresh and when they're still ready to react to things and the day hasn't turned into chaos. And then again, make sure that your message stands out in the full inbox. Avoid slang, text speak, and always be professional. Okay, the use of emojis, and this usually in previous years would turn into heated debate because without fail, somebody in the induction would challenge me on it because they felt quite shocked that I said to them, don't use emojis. And this is my view. My view is a competent communicator should be able to write an effective email or communication without having to use emojis. But, and I've added this because I did take some of the feedback on board. It also does depend on the recipient and the nature of your message. So an example would be, if you studied with somebody, you've come a long way, you were friends at varsity, you end up on the same team and you email each other now in the corporate environment and you add an emoji, that's absolutely fine. But don't fall into the trap of having to add an emoji to every sentence, because it will become even more difficult for you to write a serious message to a senior person without emojis. So practice it. Practice even with your friends. Try and write your next WhatsApp to your mom or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your partner without any emojis and still getting the tone right. So try that this weekend and see whether you can actually do it and whether that person still gets your tone and your emotions correctly. Also, if you're so concerned about your recipient misunderstanding your tone, maybe considering delivering your message telephonically or face to face. Maybe this is the time where you pick up the phone and just talk to the person or knock on the door and just have a quick meeting about something. In previous years, I didn't focus much on WhatsApp because WhatsApp hasn't traditionally been considered a corporate communications tool. But that's changed, especially over the past year with lockdown and COVID. Increasingly, with teams having to work remotely, everything was used: emails, WhatsApp, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google platforms, everything goes. And with that, we need to have some new guidelines in place. So traditionally, WhatsApp has been considered an informal communications tool. If you're now going to use it in the workplace, there's no point in you, for example, applying all the guidelines I gave you for email, and then you get it wrong on WhatsApp. So say, for example, you wrote an email to Vim and you being really nice and formal, and you go, "Dear Vim, I really enjoyed the essay induction this year, and this one presentation really struck a chord. Would you be able to email me the PowerPoint presentation? Kind regards, your name." And then you don't hear from Vim because he's had a long week with us and it's now weekend and you're impatient and you really want the presentation, and you send Vim a WhatsApp and you go, "Hey Vim, I'd start following up on that email I sent you with a smiley face." You've just kind of taken that whole formal communication into a whole different field, and you've just changed it, and it was probably inappropriate. I want to warn you against those water cooler WhatsApp groups that have sprung up. So a lot of companies have WhatsApp groups now at work to kind of get the team building going, to allow colleagues to interact in a more relaxed setting, but you're still at work. And here my guideline is: if you are not going to place your message on a giant billboard outside your offices in Sandton or wherever you are, with your name and photo on it for your boss to see, for your colleagues to see, then do not put it on any WhatsApp group. It is so easily screenshotted and forwarded, maybe to the wrong person. And a lot of these groups, the boss isn't on there. Also, it's very easy to offend somebody because you don't really know everybody. And once that has happened, it's really difficult to come back from that. And I'm going to give you 2 examples now. Before I get to them, respect working hours. Once again, working hours are working hours. Unless there's an emergency, the fact that you suddenly remembered something at 8 o'clock at night doesn't mean you should send it at 8 o'clock at night, not even via WhatsApp. I recently had a journalist who decided that she obviously had her most creative time at about 11 o'clock at night, and that's where she decided on the next article that she was going to write. And because she thought of it then, she would pop all the questions she had for me in a WhatsApp, and then she would see that I've read it, and then she would expect a response. So there you have to teach people how to treat you. I had to say to her that I would prefer to keep work in emails, and then I will respond to her the next day via email. It took a while. She tried it again and tried again, but now we've got a good understanding whereby she emails me questions during working hours. So these 2 examples of what can go wrong on WhatsApp groups. So in 2017, so there wasn't even the excuse of lockdown or COVID, but this group of young F&B employees had some discussions via email and WhatsApp, and they were fired by F&B, and F&B was completely entitled to do this. And a more recent example from last year, there were the 10 Discovery employees, they got COVID. They formed a WhatsApp group, which initially was about supporting each other through the COVID journey. But then more stuff got said, and that's always the thing with WhatsApp groups. And somebody took a screenshot and sent it to somebody senior at Discovery, and they were fired. So they all lost their jobs over stuff that happened on WhatsApp groups. So do yourself a favor, Google these case studies, learn from them. And on that topic, I'm just going to touch on social media because it's kind of the risks are the same. So a lot of people come into the workplace and you're used to having your Twitter account, Facebook, or say on Instagram what you need to say, you're a student, and you've got this freedom of speech, and now you work at a corporate and suddenly things change. You are familiar with all these platforms. They are the main ones. There are others, but I'm pretty sure that you are on all of these, or some of these at least. But I have to point out to you, so is your employer. Think before you post. This is some good advice from Paula Weenlin, an employment partner at a major law firm in the UK. By posting something even vaguely negative about your workplace on these social media sites is breaking the relationship of trust and confidence between the employer and the employee, and the company reserves the right to sack the employee. And as you can see, F&B did it, so did Discovery, and most corporates are going to do that if you cross the line. Here is the example of 22-year-old Connor Riley. She, as you know, 22 years old, she finished studying and she was job hunting, and she got a major break. She got offered a really nice job by Cisco. And instead of posting a happy tweet about how amazing this was, she posted this tweet that I'm showing you here on the screen. And like I said to you earlier, your employer is likely to be on those social media platforms. So Cisco obviously saw the tweet because she mentioned the company in it, and that was the end of her job offer. So just on that, if you post something about your employer, all employers track social media. I track social media for the actual society. So if you say something positive about the induction program this week, I will know about it. If you say something negative about it, I will know about it. The same with your employers. They will know about it. So this is where it blurs. You're now an employee, and you are now linked to the brand of your employer. Don't forget that. So the most important thing to do is, if you haven't done it already, and maybe you don't even know about it, but your employer will have a social media policy, please go and read it. Also read the fine print of your employment contract. Very likely you will find that it is going to say that they are allowed to monitor your social media comments and your communication at work. And if you have a work phone and your work email, they will be monitoring it. Also, once published online, your post becomes a permanent record. No matter how quick you are, how quickly you delete it, somebody will already have screenshotted it, especially if it's contentious. Online, your personal and business personas may blur. And just something on here, if I remember some time ago, I was doing a social media presentation to a client, and we're talking about personas. And I was one of the people, very senior person in the audience, in the suit, very respectable, but on social media, he had this really wacky, wild photo, which portrayed somebody completely different. And he felt that, it's his personal space and he should be entitled to do it. But when I explained that, the minute, especially in this virtual environment, you're going to meet with somebody, you're going to Google them, and you're going to form a picture based on what you found on social media profiles. So if you Google somebody and you get this wacky, crazy hairstyle, mad picture in your head, and then you're meeting with this person, you've already formed an opinion. And the fact that you're now sitting opposite somebody in a suit and all decently dressed kind of is too late already. So check your personal social media profiles, look at the photo, look at what is available publicly there, and go take a step back and go, if my boss had to see that, would I be okay with it? Even when you're talking as an individual, people may perceive you to be talking on behalf of your employer. And this becomes more and more important as you climb the corporate ladder. Also, if you're going to voice an opinion about anything to do with financial services, you need to be upfront and say that you work in financial services. You need to be honest about where you're coming from. Also, if you are not deemed an official spokesperson, then you must add a disclaimer before you comment. I'm going to leave you with some general communication tips. They will apply whether you are presenting, whether you are putting a report together, whether you are emailing, whether it's a face-to-face meeting. For all of the ways that you can communicate, these tips will apply. Number one, and I said it earlier, and it's so important that I have to reiterate it here, understand your audience. Even if it's only one person, understand your audience. If I had to organize a radio interview, say for Vim, to talk about the ASA Academy, it would be so important for Vim and myself to work through who's the audience, even for radio, for TV, for a meeting, for one-on-one. Understand who you're communicating with, because that influences how you shape the communication itself and the message. Communicate with a purpose. If there's no call to action, if there's no outcome, then why are you communicating? Be direct. Always be direct. Don't fudge the message. Simplicity is very powerful. Avoid jargon and no corporate speak. Again, people want a clear, concise, easy to understand message. Keep it brief. And there's so much information. We are all overloaded with it. The more brief you can keep something and the more relevant, the more likely your message is going to be heard. Take a top-down approach whereby you deliver the conclusion first. And why I say conclusion is because, especially if you come from an academic environment, you are used to having the conclusion at the end. But that does mean that somebody has to either get an executive summary or read through the whole thing and get to the conclusion. But this is different in the corporate world. Put your summary up front. What is it that we are dealing with? And then provide supporting facts as necessary. Again, you have only succeeded if your audience understood your key points. I'm going to leave you with this closing thought before we can take some questions. That writer does the most, who gives his reader the most knowledge and takes from him the least time. If you can get this right, then you have succeeded.
Thank you, Lucienne. Are there any questions for Lucienne? Just post them in the Q&A, please.
You will see there were some, this week, there were some controversial happenings in social media, comments made by a blogger, Old Mutual, then deciding to end their sponsorship of his blog because of that. So do yourself a favor and do research about some of these events and learn from them before it happens to you.
Yeah, I think perhaps important to add that not only in COVID, under lockdown regulations, that the office space is not the office only anymore. It extends to after hours. It extends to outside the office building complex. And if you do anything that may have a negative impact on the reputation of your employer or harm the relationship between the employer and stakeholders, or harm relationships within the employer, in other words, with colleagues, you may, and many people have been, you may be dismissed. And I think there was one, while I'm waiting for questions to come up, there are two cases I'm thinking of. The first one is that two young women who started working at the company, after hours, went to a mall, got into an altercation about a parking bay. And the thing got physical, and both of them were dismissed because the employer said, gets out that my employees get into fisticuffs over a parking bay, my reputation is down the drain. And what the two of you have done here has caused irreparable damage to the office relationship. So there you go. The other one was a policeman in KwaZulu-Natal. I think he was at the rank of major. I'm not sure. But he was a policeman, and he posted comments, a black guy, and he posted comments about white people on the EFF Facebook page. In other words, a totally party political environment outside the workplace, outside even his own private home, the kind of thing where you expect party political comments to be made. And he was dismissed. And the reason was that as a public representative or a public employee, he has an equal duty to serve all members of the public. So therefore, derogatory comments about any sector of the public would be a contravention of what he's supposed to be doing. And he took the view that this was private, this was party political, this was outside office hours, this was outside everything. Took the case to the CCMA, he lost it there. He took the case to the Labour Court, he lost it there. So it's a question again, you know, be very careful. When in doubt, don't post, delete. Remember, if I post something offensive on your LinkedIn page, if I went out there today or whatever profile, and I said, but this Lucienne is beautiful, obviously it would offend people. If you keep it like that, Lucy, that was funny. If it would have to be, if I said you're beautiful, it'd have to be funny. If I post, if somebody posts something offensive on any of your pages, accounts, whatever you want to call them, and you do not delete it, you are seen as endorsing and supporting those views, and you may be held liable for that. So please, guys, careful when it comes to these things.
You make a good point. And the same is true for when you tagged and things by other people. You might, maybe one day we'll have office parties again. And these days, everybody has the cell phone out and everything gets recorded and everything gets photographed and everything gets posted. Be very careful of that. One, expect to be recorded. Just like I said earlier, expect somebody to forward your email. But check your privacy settings on your social media accounts. And you have a setting where you can actually approve posts before you get tagged. Make sure you've activated them so that you know what you're going to get tagged in. And also just Google yourself and see what's out there. Check your privacy settings.
Yeah, because like Lucienne said, you know, people will Google you. I told the other people the other day, the other group, that there's a recruiter in Gauteng, a recruitment agency. They obviously, like they do, they screen applications for jobs. And they have a psychologist who does exactly this. He Googles all the applicants and sees what he can come up with. And there's one woman in Pretoria who applied for a position. Now she uses her Facebook account. She's very fond of cats, and she breeds cats as a very serious hobby, and she puts them into shows and they win prizes, and she sells the kittens and all of that and so on. So her Facebook page is one series of cat pictures. This one won this prize, this one entered into that competition, this, that, the other thing, all about the cats, because that's how she promotes her cat breeding business. And the psychologist looked at that and he came to the conclusion that because of all these cats on her Facebook page, she has problems relating to human beings. And he recommended that she not be considered for any position that requires her to work with clients or customers directly, because she can't relate to human beings, and also not where she's required to work in a team because she cannot relate to human beings. And the problem is that the applicant never sees that assessment. Yeah. So she was never called to an interview. She never had the opportunity to disprove him because she didn't even make the shortlist. And that's the kind of thing. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with a shot at an office party, but balance it. Post when you attend the seminar, you know, something more academic, something more work-related. You don't have to create the impression that you're all work and no play. Everybody accepts that you will have a social side, even though you're actuaries or becoming actuaries. But balance. Make sure that you're not, like she said, and that's where you see me, for example. You won't see me with this fuzzy, wavy hair thing that she spoke about. It's that kind of thing that you have to. I'm not sure what's so funny about that. Guys,
So
do you
that,
have any questions?
I think just a closing comment, talking about images, and in this case, the only people who really seen now is the presenters, and the participants, the delegates, don't have their videos on, but that will change going forward. You will be in team meetings, and there will be times when you'll be expected to put your camera on. And be prepared for it. The fact that you're working from home, and you're in a team meeting and somebody says, put the camera on, you should be ready for that. In fact, you should be the one who is quite happy to have the camera on. But again, it's what image are you going to portray? Last year, I had a workshop where I asked people to put the camera on, at least for the introductions. And there was the one person who decided to quickly log on from their phone while on the morning run. And they thought nobody would put the cameras on. There was also the CEO who'd literally just fallen out of bed with the hair all over the show. And those images cannot be unseen, and it does shape how people see you going forward.
Thank you, Lucienne. There's one question in the Q&A.
Yeah, let me look at it. Thank you for the presentation. It's a pleasure. We're living in a world where there are so many movements happening online. What is your take on posting support on these movements online without impacting your working image? That's a really good question. And I think the one thing to remember is your rights end where my rights begin, or your freedom ends where my rights begin. So think about whether you're going to offend anybody. If you want to support a specific movement, and you want to post your support for it, but think about whether anybody is going to be hurt by you supporting that. And I mean, they shouldn't, if it's a good cause or a good movement. Then it's all in the wording. It is how you express your support for it. I hope that answers your question. If not, we can talk about it some more. Just post me a follow-up question.
Just perhaps add to that. I was thinking of, at some stage during today's presentations, playing a song, a video of a song. But then Joe went and disabled my sound, so I can't do that. But so exactly the question you raise, it's a song that was written by Graham Nash in 1969. That was, Lucienne was just entering middle age then. And he saw a picture, obviously there's a post picture of a kid in a park, a young boy, standing with a toy hand grenade and an expression of serious anger on his face. And got Graham thinking about the kind of world in which we raise our children. So he wrote a song called Teach Your Children. It was recorded by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Google it, if only for the high harmony that David Crosby puts in. David Crosby is so full of chemicals. I think if it weren't for COVID, we would have made him an offer to come to South Africa. If you plug him into the network, you'll have enough energy to light up the whole sub-Saharan continent. But it's a song about, the kind of world that we are creating, and that we should teach our children, we should learn from them, and so on. Now, a video was made of this song again in 2018. 2018, you should know, came before 2020, when the George Floyd thing happened and BLM came to the front again. But BLM was established towards the end of 2013, 2014, when a black kid was shot because a security officer thought he had stolen something at the supermarket. The video itself that was written in 2018, therefore has nothing to do with Floyd. The video was created, it's an animated thing, but I really would really recommend that you look at it. But the reason I'm not playing it for you is that one of the thing is it's sketched by someone, so there are no pictures. Shows one of my two of my all-time heroes, Tommy Smith and Muhammad Ali. But there's one shot where people hold up a banner that says Black Lives Matter, and I thought, we have sponsors for this event. I do not have their permission to show this. I do not know what the views on BLM are, but because this is a sponsored event, I should not do this. Pity, it's a nice song. And I really think, and to me, the key in the video lies in the very last slide, which I hope you will find that you will see. It says that we should all care. And that's the message of the song. But yeah, that one element that got me a little worried about, am I going to mess with the reputation of my seriously and sincerely appreciated sponsors? And that's why it's not on the program today. Sorry, that's a rambling response, but I thought I'd give you time to come up with another question.
Well, we have another question, but Wim, which I'll answer. You've just explained very well your thought process, and as you guys can see, that's exactly what I talked about. Making an effort when you communicate. Wim went, I would really like to do that, and then he went, this is, from this point of view, this is why I would like to do it, but this is how it could be perceived, and this is why it could have a negative impact on the sponsors, or and he concluded that it would probably be a good idea not to do it, and that is literally what you have to go through. So if you want to support something on social media, you need to go through this process of going, by supporting this, am I causing harm to anybody? Am I offending anybody? If you want to support a Black Lives Matter movement, there's nothing wrong with it. But as you're saying in your question, what happens then in the comments is often where things go wrong. But in principle, if you want to support a movement, that in itself isn't wrong. But there are many movements out there, and then you need to also go, what kind of movement is it? What comments is this going to evoke? What emotions is it going to evoke? And as much as I am, I mean, I'm a journalist by training. Freedom of speech is something that I would go to jail for. But equally, you need to consider the impact on others and on your own career. And so literally, you'll have to go through this process before you post something. Go, what is the impact going to be?
Anonymous says, it's then advisable to not post a photo with alcohol in your hand, even though it's a calm social setting?
That is such a good question. So again, it is difficult because people will photograph you, people will tag you, and they have to advise you, go check your social media feeds regularly and check your tag settings, because you can actually activate a setting whereby you get to veto a tag, and that is so important. So I can't tell you that having a photo taken with an alcoholic drink in your hand is wrong. It depends on the setting. But if you are at a wild party that could be misunderstood, the context of it, remember, photo has no context to it, and you don't want people to see it, then don't have it posted. So there you have to decide in terms of what is it? Is it a birthday and you've got a glass of champagne in your hand and it's all very sophisticated? Is different to a raucous party. So, but again, if you wouldn't behave like that in the workplace, then don't post it. Also, yes, social media is a personal space, but then you have to put your privacy settings on. So if you go, my Facebook is only for friends and family, then activate that setting, because then that means I can't see those photos, because I shouldn't Google you and see which party you went to, because we're not friends. So you need to decide whether you're going to use Twitter for work. LinkedIn is definitely work. And if you go Facebook is only for friends, then activate that setting. If you're going to make it open to everyone, then think before you post it. In attempting to understand the audience, one may inadvertently become patronizing. How can this be prevented? Again, the best thing is usually to write your email or your message, and then to take a step back and read it again, especially if you've got a lot riding on it. And patronizing, you'll pick up on it if you take that step back. That is why it's so important to really think about it. And often I quickly send an email and then I go, oh, I should have probably thought about that some more. So, but also, if you really understand the audience, you're probably less likely to become patronizing. I hope that answers your question. But we can elaborate on it more if you want to unpack that.
While you guys are posting the next question, I just mentioned something around social media and your social media profile and all of that and so on. It is correct that your company may fire you if the workplace has basically been extended. It's not the four walls of the office anymore. And if what you do after hours, especially on social media, has a negative impact or may have a negative impact on the image of the employer, or may have a negative impact on relationships between the employer and key stakeholders, the employer is fully within its right to dismiss you. This has been tested in labor court, so don't even hope that you can get away with it, no matter who your union representative is. I think also just another one, Lucienne, it looks as though I've hacked your session and taken over.
No,
You've been
please
so
do.
good. You've been so good. There are no questions, but there's a firm in Gauteng somewhere, a recruitment firm, and they have employed a psychologist to do research. So this guy he works through he does the social media research. So people apply for a job, and then he looks at their social media profiles. And there was a position where a woman used, her hobby is breeding cats. She's very fond of her cats, and she's using her Facebook page to promote her business, because you show the cats and they win prizes, and then you sell the kittens and all of that. So her Facebook page is one big series of cat pictures, and this one won this competition, and that one came second in that one, and all of that, and so on. And based on that, the psychologist drew up the following profile of her. This person has problems relating to other human beings because all we see on her Facebook page are pictures of cats. We therefore recommend that this person be not considered in a position where she has to interact with the public or where she is required to work as part of a team. The problem is that this person never got to see that report because she never made it to the shortlist. So be very careful. There's a final one, Lucienne, in a case where you've shared a post on social media.
Yes, you can be held responsible.
In fact, if you do not delete that post, you are legally seen as actively endorsing that post.
Yeah.
And they may come for you for that one as well. Folks, social media is like radioactivity. It can be used to treat diseases. It can be devastating. Make sure you treat your career and don't devastate it.
Yeah, I mean, Wim, you're right. In fact, if you like somebody else's damaging post, that could be damaging for you. If you repost content without thinking about it, and we've had a couple of examples in South Africa where that has happened, mostly in the political field. But in the examples I gave you earlier, also in terms of WhatsApp and content shared, those are our own industry, F&B and Discovery. I'm sure that some of you in the audience, work for those companies. Also, another thing that that's important to maybe just share is these virtual interactions. When I talked right at the beginning in terms of your brand, I did a workshop last year, and as people were coming online, one person decided that they were going to link into the session while on their morning run, and with their takeaway coffee, and that image is forever kind of stuck in my head, as is the image of the CEO who looked like she had literally just fallen out of bed and gone online. And it's changed my perception of that person. So when you participate, and yes, I can't see you, but you won't always be in meetings where I can't see you. You will be in team meetings where your boss is present and where cameras, because you never know when somebody insists on the camera going on. I do that in some meetings, and then you have no choice. You put the camera on and you look like you've just fell out of bed or out of the gym. That will become your image, your brand. Let me look at it. Is it advisable to add my colleagues on social media like Instagram? Oh, that is a really good question. So I am a firm believer of not blurring work and private, unless, like I said earlier, you studied with a person, now you end up working at the same company, you already have that friendship going. But a really good approach is to decide beforehand what is your personal space and what is your workspace. For example, if Instagram is your personal space, then make it a private account and only add people that are part of your inner circle. If Twitter is your work, is where you share professional opinions and where you kind of grow your network, then you would add your colleagues to that. But the lines shouldn't blur. And I know it's really difficult, but you need to start putting boundaries in place and deciding which social media platform is for what.
Very final question, anybody? Going. Just to add, Lucienne, there was this case earlier this year where, that's last year, where an official from the Department of Public Works was on an online meeting with the Parliamentary Committee on Public Works. And this character was lying in bed. And he joined the meeting from his bedroom, lying in bed, naked upper body, and disciplinary action followed. So yeah, that's down the drain. The thing is, sorry, you guys may know of Mr. Adam Katsavelos. If you don't, then Google the character. He's the one that had the WhatsApp fake or mock joke media news report while on a holiday in Greece. And the thing I think that was painful about that, were many things were, but what Emma Sadler said at the time was, in 5 years' time, if you Google Adam Katsavelos, this is what you'll see. So yeah, Lucienne, there's the final question.
And Wim, on that topic, it's important to just share that Adam didn't only bring himself down and ended his own career, he also ended the career of his, I think, girlfriend or wife, and his entire family's business. His restaurant business and catering business went down.
Because what happened? Sorry, go.
Yeah.
No, you go.
Because of something that he posted.
What happened was that the first thing that happened was that the company provided, or they manufactured specialist basting sauces for steakhouses. And the first thing that happened was that the major purchasers said, sorry, we're not going to, the major customer, we're not going to do business with you guys anymore. So the company then immediately, there was some, I think, excellent damage control, but it was not good enough. They immediately started unbundling it so that they could put him out, but it didn't work. The company went down. 150 employees, if I remember correctly, lost their jobs. His wife lost her job at Nike. The school where his kids went to sent him a letter saying, we don't want you to pick up or drop your kids at our school anymore. Devastating ripple effect. Lucienne, last question.
Yeah, this is also a really good question. I think the answer there is your freedom ends where my rights begin. And that is a really good guideline to remember. So you should have your views and your religious views or political, but if you're going to post it, just remember that while you've got the freedom to express yourself, I've also got rights. So if it's your view and it's not going to be insulting or hurtful to anybody else, then yes. But if there's even one person that you could insult through your views, then don't do it.
Can I just add to that again, taking over and hogging the conversation? There was a case a few years back in KwaZulu-Natal where a police officer posted on the official account of the Facebook page of the EFF. And he made comments about, I forget the nature of it, but he made comments about white people. There was a black police officer, and on the EFF, which is a political party, a registered political party, represented in Parliament of the Republic of South Africa. So, you can't say this is anything other than a political view, anything other than a political platform. He was dismissed because the argument was that as a public representative, fine for him to have political views, but they should not interfere with his work as a representative of the total public. And because that was seen to be compromised, he was dismissed. He took it to the CCMA, he lost. He took it to the Labour Court, he lost. Guys, err on the side of caution with this thing.
Yeah, the F&B case study that I mentioned, you can Google it. It has some really good insights in it as well, because the whole thing started when the F&B employees started, talking about, making jokes, commenting on the DA's leader's wife being white. So you would maybe think, so what? She is white, and so what if if we think it's funny? It's some of the comments that then were added to that led to the whole thing. And these guys were dismissed, and the court upheld it. So really think about the impact on other people that your post is going to have.
Final one in this regard, were they journalists? The journalist FHM, if I remember correctly. And there was this Twitter thing, and I'm bringing it up because this was a case of tasteless humor, where they went into date rape. It started as banter, and it just got more serious and more distasteful. It started with a comment about white people twerking. And they were both dismissed. And the editor, it was FHM, if I remember correctly, Lucienne. The editor's first response, public response to this was, "These guys have messed with my brand."
Yeah.
He tried. He was a little less harsh. Subsequently, he said, "Yeah, they're young, they're inexperienced." But the thing that triggered the dismissal is they messed with his brand. So again, get back to what we spoke about in professional ethics yesterday. Can someone think or interpret what you have done as having messed with the brand, whether that's the corporate brand, political brand, religious brand, whatever brand? If so, do not post.